to introduce our speaker for today. Altovise Love-Craighead has been with the Philadelphia Police Department since 1994, and throughout her career has received many promotions and much recognition for her accomplishments. In 2002, she received an award for her efforts from the FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force from the United States Attorney's Office. In October 2010, she was promoted to lieutenant, ranking #1 out of 195 candidates, the first woman in Philadelphia Police Department history to rank #1 on any lieutenant promotional list. Currently an inspector with the Central Police Division, she commands approximately 600 police officers and supervisors. The Central Police Division comprises the entertainment area of the city, which includes 158,000 residents, as well as business, cultural institutions, and our own ethical society. Inspector Love-Craighead will discuss the impact of her brother's murder and on her family, which allowed her to take a closer look at law enforcement profession and how the police engage in those crises.
Thank you for being here, and I'd like to thank the Philadelphia Ethical Society for having me. Thank you, Bob Buding, for the introduction, and thank you, Roland, for the beautiful music. I'd like you to take note of these flowers in front of me. They were provided by Bob and entitled for today, "For Peace and Calm in Our World of Turmoil." And I think it's very fitting for what we will be talking about today. I oftentimes have disclaimers. The topic is very sensitive to me, so I carry tissue because I may cry, and I assure you I'll be okay. It's something that I always have to work through, but it should show you how important this topic is to me. All right, here we go. So I was born and raised in Philadelphia in the Germantown section of the city. My mom was a single mom, and I had 3 sisters and 1 brother. And my mom was a drug and alcohol counselor with the Philadelphia prison system. She would sell Mary Kay cosmetics on the side, and oftentimes would give the cosmetics to us and tell us to sell it so that we could have money in our pockets because we were poor. I was raised as a Jehovah's Witness, and my mom was very open to religious beliefs, oftentimes tried many religions. But I found myself fascinated with Islam. I am not Muslim. I've never joined the Islam faith. But I was always intrigued by the stories of Elijah Muhammad. And I would often read books and buy their newspapers. So, if you look on the top left of your screen, at the very top, you'll see 4 ladies. I'm one of them. Those are me, my older sister, and my 2 friends. We would hang together and we would go around watching the police. We oftentimes watched the police to see what they were doing to make sure they treated people appropriately. And we actually called ourselves the FBI. And I'm not sure where we got this intuition to watch the police from. I'm not sure where we got the idea to make sure people were always doing the right thing. I attribute it to my mom. She always taught us to treat people fairly, but to understand the differences in us and how those differences make people treat each other poorly. But it led me to join the Philadelphia Police Academy. And now, 23 years later, I'm an inspector in the Philadelphia Police Department. The Philadelphia Police Department is the 4th largest department in the city. It has 6,600 sworn officers and 800 civilian employees. I am the inspector of the Central Police Division. For many of you, you're probably not really sure what that means, but I cover an area that goes from Lehigh Avenue to Lombard, from river to river. That's 4 police districts, the 6th Police District, the 9th Police District, Center City District, and the 22nd Police District in the Temple area. It has approximately 158,000 residents. The Center City area alone, which is a 7.7 square mile area, from Vine to Pine, river to river, has 13 million visitors a year. That's $1 million a month, over $30,000 a day. That doesn't include the residents. That doesn't include the students. That doesn't include the commuters that come here to work. So for me, it's a very, very daunting idea that I'm responsible for all of these people. In addition to that, there's approximately 600 police officers that come under me. That includes the supervisors as well. But I feel like the reason why I joined the Philadelphia Police Department was to help people. And now I feel like everything that I have done has come in full circle. I have actually started in the patrol division, and I've done just about everything in the police department. I was a detective, and I also had an opportunity, as you heard earlier, to work with the FBI on the Joint Terrorism Task Force, where I investigated international terrorism. I spent some years with the Deputy Commissioner working in Violence Prevention and Victim Services. And I feel like joining the police department kind of drew me back to my community and the reasons why I joined in the first place. When I joined, there wasn't a really feel-good story. It wasn't really about, let's join a department because we want to help people. It was actually a bet that I had with my sisters and my friends that you see up there. But I was actually the only one that kept going forward. We all took the test, we all passed. I just kept going at it. And so my ongoing work with the Deputy Commissioner in the Victim Services Unit, where I was able to institute system-wide policy that involved trauma-informed policing, and opportunities like this to give talks about my personal experience and how I integrated into the police department makes everything feel like it's coming back to a powerful full circle. And that's because of something that happened to me back in 1997. On March 26, 1997, my only brother, Emir Green, was shot and killed in Philadelphia. He was shot 7 times in the back. That's my brother. You see next to the picture of me and my sister, my girlfriend, that's a pencil drawing of my brother that was presented to my mother. And like it says on the website of the Emir Healing Center, every murder is real. My brother was a good son. He was a protective brother. He was a comedian, and he was the life of the party. With his laughter, he always made people feel good. But what led to his murder is something that people don't always want to look at. I'm talking about the deep-seated racism, abuse from a heroin-addicted father, and a search for a father figure that led him to the streets, where he got involved with the wrong people that he thought were his friends, his deep desire for acceptance that led to activity in drug sales. All of that gets overshadowed by, the murder gets overshadowed by all of that. I'm not condoning illegal activity. I just like to give a fuller picture of my brother and what my brother was, who he was, what he stood for. Because when you're murdered behind drug activity, what that person was, that whole other person is never viewed. The murder itself is always overshadowed. Because when you're murdered in street drug activity, what you were like, who you truly are, what happened to you, the struggles you've dealt with, a family's deep loss, all the collateral damage, it gets overshadowed by that illegal activity. What I would often hear from officers that I worked with was, it's just another drug dealer off the street. Family and friends would say to us, when are you going to get over this? What did you expect? But they never talked about how it impacted us. And today there's still very little discussion about what murder does to a family, who the murder victim was, and what happened to him along the way. Because there's always a backstory worth listening to. So what I decided to do was, I thought about what happened to my family, and I thought about the impact it had on us. I thought about what the police would say, and they didn't say this to me directly. I would go to other shooting scenes, and they would say the same thing. That's that drug dealer from this location. That's that drug dealer from, 9th Street. And they would actually say, oh, one less problem we have to worry about. But how did that make me feel? Because they're actually talking about my brother. So I decided to come up with a program or a training that could kind of let them relate to what I was feeling and to see how other families felt. Because despite the fact that my brother was involved in street drug activity, despite the fact that he was murdered and not here, we still had to live. We still had to survive, and we still had to overcome the tragedy. So I developed trauma-informed policing. And I go around and I speak to officers to teach them about trauma, the impact on the family, and what it does to the job when you're a police officer, how your approach to them can affect them and re-traumatize them. And I was actually able to get some grant funds from the U.S. Attorney's Office to do a pilot program in the 22nd District, which is in my area. And that's what we're doing currently. We actually started a few weeks ago. And so what I thought I'd do is give you a quick synopsis of the PowerPoint presentation that I provide to the officers, and then we can have a little discussion afterwards. So what is trauma? Trauma is the physical and emotional harm that impacts a person's mental, physical, social, emotional, and spiritual well-being. It's what makes us keep going. All of the insides of us that keep us going, that makes us live every day, is impacted when you experience a traumatic situation. And unaddressed trauma leads to behavioral and physical health conditions, mental health issues like anxiety and depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, and oftentimes it leads people to use substances like alcohol and drugs. And when one is affected by trauma, sometimes they disengage or they tune out. They could be numb. I don't know if you've ever seen people walk around as if they're not completely there. They have no outward signs of stress. So it's almost as if nothing really happened, but they try to disengage from the world and not be affected by what's going on around them. And then oftentimes people can exhibit what we call hypervigilant. They're jumpy. And I say this about police officers because we're so often engaged in crisis mode. I'd say, we spend a lot of time waiting for stuff to happen, and then when it happens quickly, it happens fast, it escalates fast, and it's a complete chaos. And so I feel like officers often exhibit hypervigilance all the time. That's when you're jumpy. You could be irritated or impatient. And there are symptoms to that. Physical symptoms could be nausea, flashbacks. I remember when my brother was first murdered, and I would actually go around I'd go around about my day as normal, but I would see flashbacks of the night we were notified that my brother was murdered. Oftentimes I would walk around and I would look at young men who reminded me of my brother. For a moment I had to catch myself because I thought it was him. People oftentimes have trembling, fear, anger, and memory gaps. And for kids, it oftentimes halts their development. They don't develop healthy coping strategies, and they'll oftentimes question authority. And so kids are increasingly affected by that. And what it actually shows is that if children are affected by trauma and they don't develop healthy coping strategies, they end up with the police. They end up in the criminal justice system. And oftentimes it allows kids to develop mistrust of adults and police and authority figures, like our teachers as well. So when trauma is addressed, we actually develop creative, positive experiences for the kids. We reduce the recurrence of criminal involvement, and oftentimes we reduce the events or likelihood of retaliation. We actually build community trust in the police, and we develop the ability to use the resources available to us within the community. So, I thought that I would come up with a definition for trauma-informed policing that other police departments could actually utilize. And it is actually developing organizational policies that address and accommodate the vulnerabilities of trauma survivors, and it allows police services to be delivered in a way that will not cause re-traumatization. And this is something that we actually did in the Philadelphia Police Department when I was with the Victim Services Unit. We were actually able to sit down and come up with a policy to service victims, and we included some of the trauma-informed skills within the policy that the officers would be able to follow. So what it means simply is a lot of times you'll find people always ask people that have issues, what's wrong with you? Imagine if somebody came up to you and said, what's wrong with you? How does that make you feel? Anybody? Horrible. It's judgmental, right? And so I looked up wrong, and what I found was inaccurate, misguided, out of order, rotten, erroneous, not right, faulty, and bad. And so what trauma-informed policing tells us, it tells us that we should ask, instead of what's wrong, ask what happened. What's happened to you? Because usually the behavior they exhibit is a buildup of everything that's come before you actually got there to talk to the person. And so I looked up happened, and I got develop, come into being, materialize, result, befall, issue, stumble, or turn out. So what's the difference between the two? What's the difference between what's wrong with you and what's the difference between that and what's happened to you?
It's not judgmental, and it's not putting the blame on the person.
It's not putting the blame on the person, exactly. It's a moment in time. It's not a definition of who that person is. It doesn't tell you that that person is wrong. It's what's affected them. And so what trauma-informed policing means is to be curious about that person, because there's always a backstory, like my brother, that's worth listening to. So I came up with some concrete ways that officers can actually put this into play while they're working, because it's easy for us to sit here and talk about it and me to tell you what it should be and what it should look like. But that doesn't mean you'll be able to translate it into your duties. And so I came up with these 3 basic tools: ventilation and validation, safety and security, prediction and preparation. And so ventilation and validation simply means if you're dealing with someone who's going through crisis, they may be acting out. Sit there and listen. Provide them the opportunity to express how they feel without judging them. Listen to them and let them know that what they're experiencing is normal for the abnormal situation that they're in right now. Validate their feelings by letting them know that what they're discussing with you right now is the only thing that's important at that particular moment. And then there's safety and security. Safety and security means addressing their safety concerns at that moment. And I always give the example to the police officers that if you get there and someone's house was burglarized, you take the report, you just walk away. What if their door is off the hinges? What if they live alone and they don't feel safe? How can we as police officers make them feel safer and help them in that situation other than taking a report and walking away? So I simply say, ask them, is there somebody I can call for you that can help you get your door secured? Is there somebody I can call for you to come sit with you so you'll feel safe when I leave? Is there some way that I can help you to make you feel safer while this situation is going on? And then there's prediction and preparation. That simply means explaining to them the whole criminal justice process, from the police report to the point where someone is arrested and you have to go to court, because that lets them know that there's a process that needs to take place, but that also lets them know that there's an end point to this crisis, that this will not go on forever. And in addition to that, they understand what their role will be and what's expected of them. And so oftentimes we find that when we take victims to the detectives, we get there, they tell us the story. We take them to the detectives, they have to tell the story again. They see the DA, they have to tell the story again. How daunting is that? But if we explain that to them before it happens, I know you've been through a crisis and I'm very sorry this has happened to you, but here's what's going to happen. We're going to go to the detectives. You're going to have to explain to them what happened. And I know you've explained this to me, but unfortunately I'm going to need you to do it over and over again. At least they know what's expected. And then when they go to court, they'll know that somebody's been arrested and we need them there to get the testimony to make sure that the person can go to jail. Otherwise, they get back out. Why does it matter? Because it makes us better police officers. It helps us facilitate a criminal investigation from start to finish, like I said. It improves our police skills. It reduces the recurrence of retaliation and other criminal behavior. And we also get to leverage the resources available to us in the community. I don't know if you all know, and here's a pet peeve of mine. And I understand why it happens. You call 911, you see the police, and you tell the police all of your problems in the world, right? There's tires on my lot. I need those tires taken away. Or the neighbor left their child home and they're not supervised. Well, all of those are things that police really don't handle. You know, we have other services in our community that provides for those. But because 911 makes us easily accessible, we're out there, we're easily identified, people oftentimes bring all of their problems to us. And I say to the officers, that's fine. What we have to understand is we have limitations. We aren't experts in child behavior, and we aren't experts in street cleanup. Those are things we don't do. But what we have the unique ability to do is connect people to the available resources out there in the community. So I talked about all of the behaviors that one can exhibit when you go through crisis. You know, you avoid interactions with people. You may seem numb. The problem with that is police often see that as nothing's wrong. So if you're numb, you're not showing any signs of stress, I've heard officers say, oh, maybe this really didn't happen. Or maybe they had something to do with it, and then they were victimized. Because when you don't show signs of stress, people think it's not important to you. People think you don't deserve compassionate police service. So if they understand that numbing is a normal reaction to crisis, then they'll understand that maybe they are not trying to hide something. Or the hypervigilance when you're jumping. A lot of times with shooting victims, the first thing we think when we come to them and we say, who shot you? I don't know. What do you mean you don't know? You were right there. The first thing we say is, oh, they won't cooperate. And then we never go back to them. We write them off. We write that case off. And it simply means that we just have to go back to them. They're under crisis. If you were shot, would you think about, oh my God, I got to tell the police who did this. I got to make sure they know. What happens when you're in crisis and your brain functions differently than when you're not in crisis? When we're doing our normal daily routines, what we do is we take in information, we think about that information, we decide what to do with the information, and then the feelings come afterwards. But when you're in crisis, what happens is the feelings come first. You get afraid, you're scared, you're excited, and it's not until after the fact that you sit down and process what happens, and you actually think about it. So when we come to people and they say, I don't know what happened, I can't remember, I tell the officers, give them time to process what has happened to them. Because they're probably saying too, who shot me? I got to figure this out. Why they shoot me? What's going on? And so we need to let officers know that they need to come back to people, maybe a day or two afterwards, because they have probably developed some more information that they would be willing to share with us. And it simply means that, well, like I said, the reactions that they have are normal for abnormal situations that they find themselves in. So we can use these tools to help us when we're doing our investigations. And if we don't understand these tools, what happens is we decrease the chance that the victim will assist us during our whole criminal investigation. We don't give them opportunities to leverage the services that's available to them. I was a detective, and one of the things we would do when we would investigate somebody is we would get close to them as we interrogated them, and we would decrease the space and get in their face, because it makes them uncomfortable. And they would be more than willing to speak because they want you away from them. But when you're dealing with a victim, that doesn't work. When you're dealing with someone in crisis, that does not work. because they have boundary issues that could trigger them and can trigger the emotion from the crisis that they've experienced. And so I often tell people, make sure you keep your boundaries when you're talking to them. In addition to that, I tell them, don't promise them things that you can't keep. Don't tell them, oh, we're going to arrest a guy if you're not sure. Because then you can't deliver on that promise, and then they start not to trust us. So I give officers key steps on what to do when they're out in public and when they're experiencing people in crisis. And I often tell them, just take a step back and think about ways that you have experienced or you witnessed trauma yourself. Think about how you felt when you were in a traumatic situation. Think about the energy that it sapped from you, because when you're going through trauma, it really saps your energy. It makes you not want to be able to go on. The emotional toll on your body is stressful. It makes you tired. And I tell them to recognize their own trauma experiences and put themselves in that person's shoes. How would you want to be treated? How would you feel? And get to know your own biases. Oftentimes I talk about the differences in people. Race, cultural, sexual orientation. Because if you know about people's different cultures, you can use that to make the person feel more comfortable. Have you ever been in a room and walked in and thought, oh my God, I'm the only one here. I'm the only female inspector in my department of 6,600 people. And so a lot of the meetings I go to, I'm the only female. And I always walk in, and I do it every time. I take a look around and I go, oh God, here we go again. I'm the only one. But think about how that makes somebody feel. You feel like you don't belong. You feel like people are looking at you. You feel like you can't relate. And so I tell the officers, if you're a Caucasian or you're black and you're dealing with a Latino, well, maybe it might be best suited to find another Latino that can be with them and make them feel. If you know this person's sexual orientation is one way, then maybe find somebody within our department that can relate to them and make them feel more comfortable. And then I also talk about ensuring that people feel like that they have a voice. When you're in crisis, you feel like you've lost control of your whole situation. And so if you allow them an opportunity to play a part in what the process brings to them, you might be able to say to them, okay, we have to sit down and talk. Is there a place that's most comfortable for you where we can talk privately, where you feel like you can speak freely? Or if you go to a home and there's someone there with a lot of kids and the kids are yelling and screaming, well, maybe it's possible they haven't eaten today. So you could stop and say, can I get your kids some snacks? Have they eaten today? And that allows that person to focus on the crisis that they're in at the moment. And so I give officers cues to show themselves when they need to take a deep breath, take a step back, and look at themselves and say, wait a minute, I'm showing some bias, I'm not being compassionate, I'm not looking at the bigger picture, I don't see the backstory. And so I tell them, the next time you think that somebody must be broken, crazy, or unmanageable, think again. Because oftentimes what happens when we're under trauma, it can look like we have mental health issues. The next time you feel yourself getting angry or frustrated, as you think to yourself, why should I give someone extra support when I've had issues myself and I've overcome them? Think how amazing it is that you survived your own traumatized issues, but think how more amazing it would be if you had someone there to support you. The next time you hear yourself assuming someone is just lazy, they're expecting a handout, think again. Their trauma or their sustained trauma, and that's trauma that happens to you over and over and over again, like what happens in some of our urban communities. This may have taken all of their motivation. Know that they didn't start life this way. Understand that this laziness could be a normal reaction to an extremely difficult situation that seems to never end. And I always use the example Sandy Hook because when there's a mass killing, people often always want to help, and as they should. People always want to give. You'll see loads of people screaming out, "We want to help, we want to help." But when there's a shooting in an urban neighborhood, you don't hear the outcry. And what you'll find is they're expected to get up and move on as if it didn't happen. And then I tell people, the next time you feel you're done, like there's no way to get through to people, or especially our kids, sit yourself down and think again. Not getting through is not about you, but about what happened to that person and who came before you. It's that backstory. You'll find out quickly that it's nothing against you. Rather, it's a shield that's been built up after being exposed to trauma after trauma. And if you keep at it, you might just find that you can become a better police officer because you were able to connect. I like a quote that I have. I keep quotes. I see quotes and I write them down and I keep them. And one is, when you move into a position of authority, you no longer have the right to abuse people. Thank you.